She was my cousin, the one I trusted most, until she stole my husband and left my world in ruins. Betrayal, heartbreak, and revenge collide in this gripping Houston-based drama as I navigate love, loss, and the power of reclaiming my life. Watch my journey from pain to empowerment and discover how strength can rise from betrayal. Don't miss a single twist of this emotional roller coaster. My name is Liana Brooks, and until 2 years ago, I believed my life was everything I'd ever prayed for. I had a loving husband, a cozy home in Houston's quiet suburbs, and a cousin who was like the sister I never had. Her name was Sierra, bold, beautiful, and always the center of attention. Growing up, she had this effortless charm that made people orbit around her. My mother used to say she was a storm in silk. I was the calm one, the steady one, the dependable one. Sierra. She was the spark that burned fast and bright. When my husband Ethan and I got married, Sierra was my maid of honor. I can still picture her standing beside me, holding my bouquet, whispering, "You're the lucky one, Liana." I believed her. Our marriage wasn't perfect. No marriage ever is. But Ethan and I had history, trust, and a rhythm that felt real. I worked as an event planner for a mid-sized firm downtown, while Ethan managed his family's auto business. We were building a life. Steadily. Quietly. Then Sierra moved to Houston. She said she wanted a fresh start. I was genuinely happy to have her nearby. I helped her find an apartment, updated her resume, even introduced her to my circle of friends. Ethan was polite with her at first, friendly but distant, the way husbands usually are with their wife's relatives. But over time, something shifted. It began with laughter. Whenever Sierra came over for dinner, Ethan laughed louder, deeper, in ways I hadn't heard in years. I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things, that maybe I was being insecure or overprotective. Sierra had always been playful. She flirted with life itself. But soon, small things began to gnaw at me. The way she'd call him E, a nickname only I used. The way her texts always came in at odd hours, and how Ethan would tilt his phone away whenever I walked by. One evening, she showed up to our house wearing one of my cardigans. When I asked about it, she smiled and said, "Oh, I borrowed it last time I stayed over. You don't mind, do you?" Her voice was light, innocent, but her eyes said something else, something sharp, testing. The moment she said that, I felt a strange chill under my skin, a quiet knowing that I didn't want to admit. A few weeks later, I caught the first real sign. Ethan had left his laptop open in the living room. I wasn't snooping. I was just tidying up before bed when I saw her name flash across his screen. Sierra Kissmark. It was just a preview of a message. "Missed you today. Last night was..." And then it cut off. I froze. My hands went numb. The sound of the air conditioner hummed faintly, but all I could hear was the thudding of my heart. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity. There it was, confirmation of the unthinkable. My husband and my cousin. Every piece of my life rearranged itself in that second. When Ethan came downstairs a few minutes later, I stood there holding his laptop like evidence in a courtroom. I asked him what the message meant. His face drained of color. He didn't lie right away. Not completely. He mumbled something about just talking and "you're overreacting." Then he turned it back on me, said I'd become distant, said Sierra just understood him. That's what cheaters do. They rewrite the story before you can even process it. I wanted to scream, to throw the laptop at the wall, to collapse. But I didn't. I just stood there, quiet and shaking, and said, "You're sleeping with my cousin." He looked away. He didn't deny it. That silence told me everything. The next morning, Sierra showed up at my door as if nothing had happened. Her hair was freshly curled, her lipstick perfect, and she held 2 cups of coffee. "For us," she said sweetly. I wanted to slam the door in her face, but instead I let her in, because I needed to see if she would lie to me too. She sat on my couch, legs crossed, sipping her drink like she was in a talk show. I asked her directly, "Are you sleeping with Ethan?" Her eyes flickered, but her smile didn't fade. "Liana," she sighed, "you're just tired. You work too hard. Don't ruin your marriage with paranoia." It was that word, paranoia, that broke me. It's what people use when they want you to doubt your own truth. She walked out that day, leaving behind a faint trail of her perfume and the wreckage of my trust. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the framed photo of the 3 of us at my wedding. My arm around Sierra. Ethan's smile wide and easy. The picture looked so pure, but now all I could see were masks. The betrayal wasn't just in their affair. It was in every moment they shared in front of me, pretending. I thought of how I defended Sierra my whole life. When people said she was selfish, I called her misunderstood. When family whispered about her behavior, I told them she just needed love. I had spent years protecting her, and now she'd stolen the one thing that was mine. My home felt foreign. My bed, my walls, my memories, all contaminated. But here's the thing no one tells you. Betrayal doesn't just destroy, it awakens something. It strips you down to bone, and then, slowly, you start to rebuild, not for them, but for yourself. And that night, instead of crying, instead of begging, instead of plotting revenge, I quietly made a promise that I would never let their betrayal define me. Because if they wanted to live in deceit, then let them. Eventually, lies rot from the inside. And someday, karma would come knocking, on their door, not mine. The morning after confronting Ethan and Sierra felt strangely still. Houston's sky was painted a dull gray, the kind that hovers before rain. I sat on the porch steps with a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the quiet street. Every sound, the neighbor's sprinkler, the distant bark of a dog, felt sharper, louder, as if the world was trying to remind me that it was still spinning, even when mine had stopped. Ethan was gone before sunrise. No note, no text, just his car missing from the driveway and the faint smell of his cologne in the hallway. I didn't chase after him. I didn't need to. Deep down, I knew where he'd gone. To her. The cousin I once called sister. I walked back inside and glanced around the house. Our wedding photos, the souvenirs from road trips, the plants I'd begged him to keep alive. Every corner held pieces of us, of me, of who I thought we were. It's strange how betrayal makes familiar spaces look haunted. I grabbed my phone and opened our shared cloud storage. Ethan wasn't careful. He never was. Inside a folder labeled Receipts, I found photos that had nothing to do with invoices. There she was. Sierra, wrapped in his arms. A selfie in his truck. A dinner table I recognized. My favorite restaurant, the one where he proposed to me 3 years ago. My stomach turned. They didn't even try to hide it. In one photo, she was wearing a necklace I'd lost months ago, a simple silver pendant with a tiny emerald. Ethan had bought it for our 2nd anniversary. I scrolled further, numb, until I found a message thread between them synced from his phone. Her words spilled across the screen, casual and cruel. Sierra, she's still so naive. She actually thanked me for helping Ethan with his stress. Ethan, don't feel bad. She'll be fine. You and I make more sense. Sierra, we always did. That last message hit harder than the rest. We always did. As if I'd been an interruption in a story that was supposed to belong to them. I felt my throat tighten. I closed the laptop and pressed my palms against my eyes, forcing back the tears that burned. I had given so much of myself to both of them, my trust, my loyalty, my love. And in return, they shared my marriage like a secret between two conspirators. That afternoon, I called my mother. She adored Sierra, always had. My aunt, Sierra's mother, passed away when she was a teenager, and my mom had taken her in for a while. So, when I told her what had happened, the silence on the line stretched long. "Oh, Liana," she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "Are you sure?" "Yes." My voice came out flat, almost mechanical. "I saw the messages, the pictures. It's not a misunderstanding." There was a pause. I could hear her sigh deeply. "Sierra always wanted what you had," she said softly, "even when you were kids. But I never thought she'd." "She did." I cut her off gently. For a while, neither of us spoke. I could tell she was crying quietly on the other end, but I didn't have tears left. I felt hollow, not angry, not sad, just emptied out. My mother tried to convince me to come stay with her for a while, but I refused. I didn't want to run. Not yet. Something in me, something small and fierce, wanted to face it, to see the truth for myself. The next day, I drove to Sierra's apartment complex. It was a new building on the west side of Houston. Glass balconies, pristine landscaping, the kind of place people show off online. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't even know what I was hoping to see. Maybe confirmation. Maybe closure. At around 5, Ethan's car pulled into the lot. I recognized it instantly, the dent on the bumper, the faded dealership sticker. He got out, checked his phone, and walked up to Sierra's building like he belonged there. He didn't even glance around. Something inside me broke quietly, like a branch snapping in the wind. He'd stopped hiding. I could have confronted them right then, stormed in, screamed, thrown his ring at their faces. But instead, I stayed in my car, gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. Because I realized something important in that moment. They didn't deserve my rage. They wanted chaos. They wanted me to unravel so they could justify what they'd done. So, I chose silence. And silence, I've learned, can be louder than any scream. That evening, I packed a small bag, just essentials. My clothes, my documents, a few photos that still meant something. I left my wedding ring on the kitchen counter beside a note that said, "You two deserve each other." Then I walked out. I drove aimlessly through the city, letting the skyline blur through my tears. The lights of Houston shimmered against the car window like ghosts of a life that was no longer mine. I ended up at Buffalo Bayou Park, sitting by the water, watching the reflection of the city ripple with every breeze. It was quiet there, just the sound of cicadas and the distant hum of traffic. I thought about Sierra, her laughter, her lies, her hunger for attention. I thought about Ethan, his empty apologies, his cowardice. And then I thought about myself. For the first time, I wasn't the victim in my story. I was the witness, to their deceit, to my own resilience. As I sat under the fading light, I whispered to myself, "One day, this won't hurt anymore." It wasn't a prayer. It was a promise. The next few weeks were a blur. I moved into a small rental apartment near downtown, closer to my office. My coworkers noticed I was quieter, more focused, but I didn't tell anyone the full story. I didn't want pity. Meanwhile, through mutual friends and whispers at family gatherings, the rumors began to spread. Sierra and Ethan were officially together, flaunting it, even, posting photos, pretending it was true love. I didn't comment. I didn't block them. I simply watched from afar, detached, like someone observing a storm from behind a glass window. Because deep down, I knew storms always burn out. And when theirs did, I wanted to be standing strong on the other side. That was the moment I stopped being the woman who was betrayed, and started becoming the woman who would rise from it. Little did Sierra know, the man she stole was about to show her exactly who he truly was. And karma, it had just begun to take notes. Houston in late spring feels heavy, like the air itself is holding secrets. 2 months had passed since I walked out of the house I once called home, and every day I told myself I was done with them. Until the day Sierra decided to test that. I was at work when she showed up. I just finished setting up a corporate dinner at the Marriott downtown when I saw her reflection in the mirrored wall, heels clicking, sunglasses perched on her head, a smug curve on her lips. "Liana," she said, smiling like we were still cousins who borrowed each other's dresses. "You've been ignoring me." I turned slowly. "You married my husband, Sierra. What exactly do you expect me to say?" She tilted her head. "Ex-husband. You filed the papers, right? I mean, it's official now." The words sliced clean. I hadn't signed the final documents yet. Ethan had pushed for it, claiming he didn't want things dragged out. Hearing her say it like that, casual, rehearsed, made my jaw tighten. "I didn't come here to fight," she continued, glancing around the ballroom as if she owned the air. "I wanted to check on you. No hard feelings." I laughed. Short, sharp. "You wanted to check if I was broken. I'm not." Her eyes flickered. "Liana, you don't understand. Ethan and we just connected. It wasn't planned. You two had grown apart. Don't you dare rewrite my story." My voice cracked through the empty hall, echoing off the marble. "You could have had anyone, Sierra. But you wanted something that was already mine because you can't stand not being the center of someone's world." For the first time, her confidence faltered. A flush crept up her neck. "I didn't come to be insulted," she muttered. "Then you shouldn't have come at all." She turned to leave, but I couldn't stop the words that followed her out the door. "Enjoy your fairy tale, Sierra. He'll treat you exactly the way he treated me, like a secret he's already tired of keeping." She paused, glanced back, and for just a second, I saw it, the flicker of doubt. Then she walked away, heels striking the tile like punctuation marks to a lie she was still trying to believe. That evening, Ethan called. "Why did you embarrass Sierra at your job?" His voice was flat, irritated, as though I had crossed a line. "You sent her there?" I asked. "She just wanted closure." I almost laughed. "Closure? After what you two did?" "Liana," he said, sighing, "you're making it worse. I've moved on. You should too." Moved on. 2 words that hollowed me out and set me free all at once. I stayed silent long enough for him to fill the space with his usual excuses: stress, timing, loneliness. The same recycled words that men use when they've run out of truth. When he finally stopped talking, I said, "Ethan, you didn't fall out of love. You fell into convenience." And she was easy because she already knew how to hurt me. He didn't respond. The silence on the line was heavier than his words. Before hanging up, I whispered, "You'll understand soon enough who you really married." The next few weeks blurred into long days at work and quiet nights alone in my apartment. Healing is slow. It doesn't arrive like sunrise. It creeps in through small victories. A morning without tears. A night where the ache feels dull instead of sharp. Then the cracks started to show, this time not in me, but in them. It began with a phone call from my mother. "Did you hear?" she asked cautiously. Sierra and Ethan had a scene at a family barbecue. She accused him of lying about money. I almost smiled. Not because I wished them pain, but because truth always finds its way home. More stories followed. Ethan missing work. Sierra showing up at my aunt's house in tears. A neighbor spotting him with another woman at a bar in Midtown. I didn't need to confirm any of it. I already knew how that story went. One night, as I was closing my laptop, an unknown number lit up my phone. I answered out of habit. It was Sierra. Her voice was shaky, the arrogance gone. Liana. I don't know who else to call. What happened? He lied, she whispered. About the business, the money, everything. He's been seeing someone, some girl from his office. He says it's nothing, but… I let her words hang in the air. She was sobbing now, gasping between sentences. Sierra, I said quietly, you built your happiness on my heartbreak. Did you really think it would stand? She didn't reply. Just a soft, broken sound on the other end before the call ended. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, feeling something I didn't expect. Peace. Not joy, not revenge. Just calm. Because karma doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Days later, Ethan called again. You talked to Sierra? He asked. I did. She's overreacting, he muttered. You know how she gets. The irony almost made me laugh. He was describing her the same way he once defended me. You two really deserve each other, I said softly, and ended the call. Afterward, I stepped out onto my balcony. The Houston skyline shimmered under the night haze, 1,000 lights blinking like second chances. For the first time in months, I felt weightless, like the air wasn't filled with memories but possibilities. I wasn't the woman he betrayed anymore. I was the woman who survived both of them. And as the city breathed beneath me, I realized something vital. Their story was falling apart, but mine was finally beginning. After Ethan and Sierra's chaos began to unravel, Houston felt different, quieter somehow. The noise in my life had been replaced by silence, and in that silence, I started hearing myself again. The first thing I did was rearrange my apartment. I moved the furniture, painted the walls a soft sage green, and bought new bed sheets, not to cover the past, but to remind myself I could choose new beginnings. Every weekend, I drove to Hermon Park, just to sit near the lake with a book I never read. Watching families laugh, couples walk hand in hand, it used to ache. But lately, it felt like proof that love wasn't the enemy. People were. Choices were. Some nights, the loneliness still stung. The kind that presses on your chest and makes your breath shallow. But even in those moments, I reminded myself, pain meant healing. It was strange, how betrayal teaches you patience. You start noticing small things again, the hum of the city, the smell of coffee in the morning, the way sunlight falls through curtains. I realized how much of myself I'd muted to keep Ethan's peace, how often I'd walked on eggshells to make love look easier than it was. Now, I didn't have to shrink anymore. Work became my anchor. I poured myself into it, staying late at the firm, planning weddings and corporate events. Ironic, really, helping other people celebrate love when mine had imploded. But it gave me purpose. My boss, Brenda, noticed the change. You've got this fire in you lately, she said one evening as we packed up after a gala. You're calmer, but stronger. What happened? I smiled. I stopped waiting for apologies. She laughed softly, not understanding the depth of that sentence. But I did. For the first time in years, I didn't need anyone to validate me. I didn't crave closure. I was learning to build it myself, one steady breath at a time. A few weeks later, Sierra showed up again. It was a Saturday morning, and I was watering the little plants on my balcony when I heard the knock. When I opened the door, she stood there, no makeup, hair unkempt, eyes red from crying. "Liana," she whispered. For a second, I saw the girl I'd grown up with. The one who used to braid my hair before school, the one who cried when her mother died. Beneath all the pride and betrayal, there was still a trace of her, small, fragile, human. "I just needed to see you," she said, voice trembling. "Why?" Her lips quivered. "Because you were right. About him. About everything." I stepped aside, letting her in. She sat on my couch, clutching a tissue like it was her last defense. "I thought he was different with me," she said, voice cracking. "But he's worse. He lies, he disappears for days. He's cruel." I didn't interrupt. I just listened, watching her unravel the web she'd once spun around me. When she finally looked up, tears streaking her face, she whispered, "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I had to say it. I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not because I needed to hear them, but because they sounded empty now, like a key that no longer fits a lock. I took a deep breath. "Sierra, I don't hate you," I said quietly. "But I can't go back to who I was before this. I loved you both, and you both broke something that can't be replaced." She nodded slowly. "I understand." As she stood to leave, she turned back. "You were always the better one, Liana." I shook my head. "No. I just learned my lesson earlier." She left without another word. I watched her walk down the hall, shoulders slumped, heels clicking like echoes of her own downfall. That evening, I drove to Buffalo Bayou again, the same place I'd gone the night I left Ethan. The air was warmer now, the skyline shimmering in gold and pink hues. I sat on the same bench and thought about everything, the pain, the loss, the betrayal. And for the first time, it didn't make my chest tighten. It made me smile, faintly, because somehow I'd survived it all, not by fighting them, but by forgiving myself for ever trusting the wrong people. And as the sun dipped behind the buildings, I whispered to the wind, "Let them live with what they've done. I'm done carrying it." That night, for the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt like peace. 6 months after Sierra's apology, my life had taken on a rhythm I could finally call my own. The pain had dulled into memory, and in its place, there was focus. Work was thriving. Brenda promoted me to lead planner for high-profile events, which meant long hours, big clients, and the kind of challenges that made my blood hum with purpose. The old version of me, the one who lived for Ethan's approval, would have second-guessed every decision. But this new version? She made choices without hesitation. She trusted her gut. One evening, after wrapping up a charity gala at a downtown hotel, I caught a glimpse of myself in a mirror near the exit. My hair was pinned back neatly, my makeup soft but strong, my smile real. I realized I looked like someone who had finally stepped out of the shadows. Houston's skyline sparkled beyond the glass doors, and for once, the city didn't feel like a reminder of what I'd lost. It felt like home. My coworkers had started inviting me out more, rooftop dinners, late-night margaritas, even a weekend trip to Galveston. For months I'd said no, afraid that laughter might somehow betray my healing. But one night, I finally said yes. Sitting on the rooftop of a cozy bar, surrounded by laughter, I found myself talking freely again. There was no weight in my words, no need to hide sadness between sentences. That's when I met Adrian. He wasn't like Ethan, no arrogance, no need to dominate every conversation. He was quiet, observant, with a kind of calm energy that made people feel safe. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, Houston traffic, favorite movies, the best coffee spots downtown. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to explain my scars. I just existed, present and light. When he walked me to my car, he said, "You have this strength about you, the kind that doesn't come from luck." I smiled. "No, It comes from surviving. He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded, like he understood. The next morning, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the city wake up. I thought about the past, about Sierra, Ethan, all the nights I'd spent wondering if I'd ever feel normal again. Now I knew I didn't need to feel normal. I needed to feel alive. Healing, I'd learned, isn't about erasing pain. It's about learning to dance with it until it stops stepping on your toes. I still saw Ethan in flashes, in the corner of a crowded restaurant, in the sound of a deep laugh, in the curve of a stranger's jaw. Memory is a cruel trickster. It never asks permission to visit. One evening, while setting up an engagement party at a hotel ballroom, I saw a couple slow dancing under dim lights. The man whispered something into his partner's ear, and she laughed, that full, carefree laugh I used to have. For a moment, it hurt. That small, familiar pang that reminded me of who I once was. Then, out of nowhere, my phone buzzed. A message from Sierra. Sierra, just wanted you to know I'm moving to Dallas. Starting over. I hope you're okay. I stared at the screen for a long time. Not with anger, just a quiet sadness. I typed back. I am okay. I hope you learn to be, too. And that was it. The last thread between us dissolved into nothing. Later that week, I went through an old photo album I'd buried at the back of my closet. Pictures from college, from the wedding, from family holidays. Faces smiling, unaware of what was coming. I studied one photo, the three of us at a Christmas dinner. Ethan's arm around me, Sierra leaning close. Back then, I thought love was about proximity, the people who stood beside you. Now I knew it was about honesty, the people who stay even when it's inconvenient. I slipped the photo back into the box and closed it gently. That chapter wasn't mine anymore. That weekend, I met Adrian again for coffee. We talked about everything but romance. He told me about his failed engagement, and I told him about starting over. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You talk about pain like it's a person." I smiled. It was. But I stopped letting it live rent-free. He laughed softly, and I found myself laughing too. It wasn't forced this time. It was light, easy, real. As I walked back to my car, a warm breeze swept through the street, carrying the faint scent of rain and possibility. And just like that, I realized I didn't need to wait for happiness anymore. I was already building it. It started with whispers, small, harmless comments that floated through the social circles of Houston like smoke from a slow fire. I wasn't searching for news about Sierra or Ethan. I'd built a life that didn't include their names, their shadows, or their chaos. But sometimes, the past finds you even when you don't look back. One afternoon, I was at a bridal expo downtown, setting up a booth for our agency. My coworker Melissa leaned close and said casually, "You remember that couple, Ethan and Sierra? I heard they're having issues. Something about financial trouble or an affair." I felt my stomach tighten, not with jealousy or pain, but with something quieter. The strange calm that comes when the storm you survived finally starts circling someone else. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need details. I just nodded and went back to arranging flower samples. But the universe, it seemed, had a flair for poetic timing. 2 weeks later, while leaving a client meeting at the Post Oak Hotel, I saw Sierra in the lobby. She looked different. Gone was the glow she once carried, the effortless confidence, the smug smile. She was thinner, paler, her hair slightly frizzy at the edges. When she noticed me, her eyes widened, then darted away. She turned, pretending to check her phone, but I'd already seen the shimmer of tears in her lashes. Our gazes met for the briefest second. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I simply gave a small nod, not of pity, but acknowledgement. She had made her choices, and so had I. As I walked past her, a part of me expected my heart to twist, to ache. But it didn't. It stayed still, peaceful, strong, untouchable. Later that night, as I sat on my balcony with a glass of white wine, I thought about how strange justice can be. It doesn't always come loud or violent. Sometimes it arrives softly, disguised as silence, distance, or reflection. I didn't wish pain on Sierra, but I did wish growth. And maybe that's what made the difference between her and me. I had learned from my heartbreak. She was still trying to outrun hers. A few weeks later, I was reviewing contracts in my office when Brenda stepped in holding her tablet. "You'll never believe this," she said. "You remember Ethan Rhodes? The real estate guy you used to work with?" My pulse didn't even quicken. "Yeah. Why?" She sighed. "He's all over the business news. Lawsuits, debts, something about fraudulent investments. It's messy." For a moment, the air felt heavy, not because I cared, but because the universe had just handed me closure on a silver platter. I opened my laptop and searched his name. There it was, Rhodes Investments under investigation. His photo, the same confident smirk that once melted me, now looked hollow beneath the headline. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. It was revelation. People don't get away with who they are. Not forever. That night, I met Adrian for dinner at a quiet Italian restaurant near Midtown. He noticed my calm expression and asked, "Rough day?" "Actually," I said, smiling faintly, "it was clarifying." We talked for hours, about trust, resilience, and the strange beauty of seeing truth unfold at its own pace. He didn't push, didn't ask for details. He just listened. At one point, he said something that stuck with me. "Some people spend their whole lives trying to win, even if it costs them peace. You, Liana, you learn to walk away and let peace win instead." His words settled deep in me like an anchor. As I drove home that night, Houston's skyline glittered ahead. The same city that had once witnessed my worst heartbreak now reflected a different kind of light. Freedom. Maybe karma wasn't about punishment after all. Maybe it was about balance, about giving people exactly what they need to see who they really are. And as for me, I had already seen enough. It came on an ordinary Tuesday, the kind of day that shouldn't carry ghosts. I was in the middle of finalizing decor plans for a high-profile charity gala when my phone buzzed. The name on the screen stopped me cold. Ethan Rhodes. For a moment, I just stared at it, as if it were some kind of glitch, a name that should have been buried years ago suddenly rising to the surface. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity, that quiet, dangerous force, whispered otherwise. The message was short. "Liana, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but please, I need to see you. Just once. No tricks. Just talk." I read it 3 times, then set my phone face down. My hands weren't shaking, surprisingly. My heart didn't pound. I just felt detached. Still, that night, I couldn't stop wondering why now. Was it guilt, regret, or the weight of his own crumbling world? 2 days later, another message arrived. "Please, Liana, you don't owe me anything, but I owe you the truth. 1 coffee. That's all I'm asking." I showed it to Brenda during lunch. She frowned. "Liana, this man doesn't deserve 5 minutes of your time." "I know," I said softly. "But maybe this isn't about what he deserves. Maybe it's about what I need." And that's how I found myself agreeing to meet him. We chose a quiet cafe on the outskirts of Houston, neutral ground. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting near the window. He looked smaller. Not physically, but in presence. His once polished aura had dulled. The confident CEO I once admired had been replaced by a man who looked tired, defeated, haunted. "Hi," he said, standing awkwardly as I approached. "Ethan," I replied simply, taking the seat across from him. For a few moments, silence sat between us like a third person, heavy but patient. He cleared his throat. "You look good. Different." "I am different," I said evenly. He nodded, his eyes flickering with something that might have been guilt. "I heard about your success, the events, the awards. You always had that drive." I didn't respond. He wasn't here to compliment me. After a moment, he exhaled, his voice breaking. "I ruined everything, didn't I?" I looked at him, really looked. "You didn't ruin everything, Ethan. Just what you touched." He winced, and for once I didn't flinch at his pain. It was strange, almost sad, seeing the man I'd once loved so deeply now grasping at fragments of remorse. "I thought I wanted something new," he confessed. "Excitement, validation. But Sierra and we destroyed each other. I lost everything. The business, the money, even her." He rubbed his face with his hands. "You warned me, Liana. You saw it before I did." "No," I said quietly. "You saw it too. You just didn't care enough to stop." He nodded slowly, tears gathering in his eyes. "You hate me." I took a long breath. I did. For a long time. But hate's heavy, Ethan. I learned to stop carrying it. He looked at me then, the way a man looks at a life he knows he can never return to. When we left the cafe, he reached for my hand instinctively, but I stepped back. "Don't," I said gently. "Whatever we were, it doesn't exist anymore." He swallowed, nodding. "I understand. I just needed to say sorry to someone who once loved me enough to deserve it." I gave him a small, tired smile. "Then say it." His eyes glistened. "I'm sorry, Liana. For all of it." I nodded. "I know." And then I walked away, not because I needed distance, but because I'd already arrived at peace. That night, I drove through Houston's quiet streets with the windows down. The air was cool, the city lights glimmering like a promise of something new. I stopped at a red light and caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Older, wiser, softer. For the first time in years, I felt complete. Over the next few weeks, I noticed how everything around me started to feel lighter. My work flourished. My circle grew closer. Adrian and I spent more time together, not because I needed love to fill a void, but because I finally had room for it. We spent weekends at farmers markets, quiet nights cooking at home, and long drives to nowhere just to talk. He didn't try to fix me. He just met me where I was, whole, flawed, human. One evening, as we sat on my balcony watching the city skyline glow under a lavender sky, he turned to me and said, "You ever think about them? About the past?" I smiled softly. "Sometimes, but only to remind myself how far I've come." He nodded, taking my hand. "You really are the calm after your own storm." I leaned my head on his shoulder. "No," I whispered. "I'm the storm that learned to love the calm." And just like that, I realized closure isn't a conversation, or an apology, or even justice. It's the quiet moment when you finally stop needing answers. I didn't forgive Ethan because he deserved it. I forgave him because I deserved peace. And peace, I learned, is the most beautiful revenge of all. The Houston skyline in summer carried a golden haze, softening the harsh edges of the city I had once known as a place of betrayal. Now every street, every light, felt like a chance to rewrite my story. I'd started taking on bigger clients at the event firm, corporate launches, celebrity weddings, charity galas. My name had begun circulating as one of the most creative planners in Houston. Work no longer felt like a distraction from heartache, it became my sanctuary. Adrian and I were growing closer, though we weren't rushing anything. He respected the life I had built, the strength I carried, and the scars I no longer hid. For the first time, I wasn't seeking someone to complete me. I was complete, and love had simply stepped in as a companion rather than a necessity. One evening, after a long day coordinating a high-profile art gala downtown, I stepped onto my balcony with a glass of champagne. The city shimmered beneath the twilight sky, each light reflecting my sense of accomplishment and freedom. I realized fully that I had built something that betrayal could never touch: my self-worth, my confidence, my peace. And the best part? I didn't have to prove it to anyone. Work had taught me patience, creativity, and resilience. Love had taught me boundaries. And the past had taught me this: life doesn't wait for closure, it waits for courage. I smiled softly as Adrian joined me, handing me a coffee cup instead of champagne this time. "You've changed, Liana," he said quietly. "I had to," I replied. "I chose myself first." And in that moment, I understood that true beginnings don't come from endings. They come from the courage to stand tall after falling. A month later, I attended a charity fundraiser at one of Houston's top hotels. I was helping coordinate tables and speeches when I felt a familiar presence: light heels on marble floors, a delicate perfume I knew too well. Sierra. She stood at the entrance, looking slightly off balance in her designer dress, scanning the room. When our eyes met, she froze. Gone was the confident, untouchable cousin who had stolen my husband. The woman in front of me seemed smaller, almost fragile, haunted by her own choices. I didn't smile. I didn't speak. I just watched her for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Finally, she approached me. Her voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. "Liana, I didn't expect. I mean, you look happy." I studied her face carefully. She looked tired, drained by a life built on lies. And that, I realized, was karma: subtle, quiet, inevitable. Not in revenge, but in truth. "I am happy," I said, calm, collected. "I'm not defined by what you took, Sierra. I'm defined by how I rebuilt myself afterward." Her eyes filled with tears, but there was nothing I could do to fix her life now. Nothing I wanted to. She nodded, a tiny, fragile gesture, and whispered, "I see that now. I'm sorry." "I know," I said softly. And just like that, the past finally released me. Sierra turned and walked away, leaving me with a clear view of the skyline, Houston glowing under the night sky. I realized something essential: revenge never heals. Growth does. Peace does. And life has a way of balancing itself when you let it. I raised my glass to the city lights, to myself, to the woman I had become. I had lost, I had suffered, and I had risen. And for the first time in years, I was truly free. Houston mornings smelled like opportunity. Sunlight spilled across the balcony of my apartment, warming the wood floors, glinting off the glass of my desk where event proposals and contracts now sat neatly stacked. I poured a cup of coffee and looked out at the skyline. The city felt alive in a way it hadn't when betrayal shadowed every corner. I was alive too, not just existing, but thriving. Work had become more than a job. It was a canvas. I'd started mentoring young event coordinators, teaching them not only about organization and creativity, but about resilience, about carving joy from chaos. Adrian and I had grown into an effortless rhythm. Weekend trips to Galveston, quiet dinners at our favorite hidden spots, long drives through the suburbs with music blasting, none of it flashy, all of it real. One Saturday afternoon, we hosted a small gathering of friends on my balcony. Laughter echoed, glasses clinked, and for the first time in years, I felt the unshakable truth. My happiness was mine. I thought about everything I had endured, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the empty nights, and I smiled. Not with bitterness, but with recognition. I had survived. I had learned. I had grown. And this life, messy and beautiful, was mine to hold. That evening, Houston glimmered under the golden glow of sunset. I stepped out onto the balcony, Adrian by my side, and took a deep breath. I thought about the past, Ethan's lies, Sierra's ambition, the nights I had cried, the mornings I had doubted myself. But those memories no longer had power over me. They were chapters, not the whole book. I thought about the lessons I had learned. Trust wisely, but never forget to trust yourself first. Pain doesn't define you. How you respond to it does. Peace is the true victory. Adrian squeezed my hand. You've come a long way, he said softly. Yes, I replied, and I still have miles to go. But I'm no longer afraid. The city lights shimmered below like tiny beacons of possibility. I realized that my story was no longer about someone who stole my love or tested my heart. It was about me, the woman who had rebuilt her life from the ashes, who had turned heartbreak into strength, betrayal into clarity, and silence into peace. I lifted my glass toward the skyline, a silent toast to resilience. To love, yes, but most of all, to myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt completely, unequivocally free. Betrayal taught me the hardest lessons, but it also showed me my own strength. Life isn't about revenge or holding on to pain. It's about rising, reclaiming your peace, and choosing yourself first. Trust wisely, forgive for your own peace, and never let anyone dim your light.